Good day, everyone, and welcome to our esteemed participants from different corners of the globe to today's seminar, SMEs in Africa, Best Practice in the New Era of Climate Governance. So let me start by expressing my appreciation to the World Economic Forum for their presence and participation in this critical conversation, and the New Champions community members for the opportunity to work together to address these global challenges and to collectively share knowledge on how they are reshaping and shaping the future of business and society today. My name is Anushka Bogdanov, and it is my privilege to host today's event and navigate this session for the New Champions community. Risk Insights is a member of the community, and I serve on the advisory board of the New Champions community for the forum. This era of climate governance is critical and crucial for humanity. In the last century, the Earth's temperature has risen by approximately 1.2 degrees Celsius. If we don't take immediate action and drastic action, we are on track, for the first time, humanity is on track to see a 3-degree increase by the end of this century. So this level of global warming would cause and lead to catastrophic consequences from more frequent and severe natural disasters, which will lead to food and water shortages, which will affect millions worldwide. The statistic underscores the urgency of addressing climate change and potentially the devastating effects that it will have on humanity and if we fail to take substantial action. So today's seminar aims to provide actionable insights and strategies for addressing climate governance and challenges and accelerating the progress towards sustainability, and some of the business strategies that our new champion communities are adopting to contribute to implement and improve the state of climate governance for this new era. The World Economic Forum recognizes the importance of sustainability for the future of the global economy and continues its mission of improving the state of the world. Addressing climate governance and its challenges aligns to the broader goals of the forum, which include sustainability, inclusivity, and economic development for all. The New Champions is a term used by the World Economic Forum to refer to a specific group of companies and leaders who play a significant role in shaping the future of business and society. These new champions are typically mid-sized companies, startups, and entrepreneurs who are seen as potential global leaders. So the new champions are really an essential part of the World Economic Forum's mission to improve the state of the world by engaging with leaders, innovators from diverse sectors and regions. We have an exciting lineup of new champions that are going to share their views and some of these sustainable strategies and products and services that they use to address climate change or climate governance for this new era. We live in a world that's interconnected, and global strategies in the local context are so important to mold and adapt, and it's also important for us to have access. So for today's seminar, we have 4 prominent new champion community leaders who will share their keynote addresses on climate governance for this new era and building on various themes ranging from supply chain, climate governance, ESG ratings, carbon counting, climate finance, and so much more. So this session aims to allow companies to have access to the new champion communities in terms of how they're thinking. And generally, this session would have been closed to new champion members. And we've had the privilege of Julia Davos, who is from the new champion community, and she heads this community that has allowed for us to open up the session to the globe. So thank you, Julia, for allowing the session to be opened. So for those of you that were expecting João Vieira de Almeida, VDA's senior partner and chairman from one of the largest legal firms in Portugal, to share his keynote address, he has sent his apologies and he's unfortunately under the weather. So to kick off today's session, we have Andrei Bogdanov, the CEO of Risk Insights, and I want to tell you a little bit about Andre before he starts his session. So prior to joining Risk Insights, he was the senior treasurer and finance executive at a Fortune 500 company for over 17 years. And he covered several parts of the globe. He is originally from St. Petersburg in Russia. And for the sake of good governance, he is my better half. So Risk Insights is a data science company that pioneered the first ESG disclosure tool in Africa to mine ESG data using machine learning and artificial intelligence. It was the first company to rate ESG disclosure for an entire stock exchange and build a model that included social and environmental dynamics of Africa and its challenges. So it was the first ESG model using AI built for Africa by Africans. So over to you, Andre.
Thank you, Anushka. Centuries ago, ancient Greek philosopher Heraclitus said that the only constant in life is change. We can probably rephrase or build on that wisdom and say that to learn and adapt is the only two constant processes that's accelerating every day as we're going through the life in 21st century. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's my pleasure and honor to speak here today. From its birth, Risk Insights has been heavily involved in the risk management practices across the globe. We're one of the first companies assisting financial institutions with what was cutting edge of risk management practices at the time, building risk models aligned with Basel principles. Over time, we have seen climate change related risk considerations taking central stage across the globe and especially in Europe. We saw those small movements leading to the huge shifts on green transition agenda. Changes were not limited to green or environmental agenda exclusively. They were much wider and deeper and related to labor practices, human rights, community engagement, ethical business practices, and many, many more. On social and governance side, countries agreed to exchange tax-related information, establish minimum income tax rates, which was unthinkable just a couple of decades ago. The world has been turning and changing at accelerated rate to something very different, and companies were moving towards concept that decades ago was so clearly formulated by the Professor Schwab, suggesting that besides shareholders, management of the companies must also serve employees and society as a trustee of the material universe for future generations. And what we know now as stakeholder capitalism. Africa for many decades was laggard in that moment for many reasons: wars, ugly inheritance of colonialism, geopolitical tensions between powers outside of continent but having major impact on the continent, challenging history, and many, many more. In 21st century, data is playing a critical role in managing almost all processes in our lives. It is behind every risk management decision that we make. At Risk Insights, we have seen huge opportunity to assist Africa in ESG transition using big data and AI in order to navigate such transition in the best interest of people living in Africa and living across the globe. At Risk Insights, we have seen opportunity to play a catalytic role on structuring climate data and ensure smooth, just transition in Africa. Seeing how Africa was behind Europe on sustainability journey, we understand how critical it will be to structure the approach to sustainability while bringing ESG frameworks into Africa context and ensure that Africa is on the right path in this complex, multi-stakeholder journey as sustainability. With a rich legacy of applying advanced artificial intelligence and machine learning techniques to data analysis and model creation, we introduced first ever AI and machine learning ESG rating tool designed for African continent under the leadership of the founder of Risk Insights. This groundbreaking model has been rolled into 6 countries now, setting us apart as the only tool capable of rating all listed companies at the stock exchange. This accomplishment showcases our unwavering commitment to elevating the standards of the ESG in Africa. It was noticed and Risk Insights collected a number of international awards as the best ESG data provider in Africa and best ESG research house in Africa, for instance. More importantly, we were very proud to sign first ever deal with a leading Africa exchange, Nairobi Securities Exchange, as ESG data provider to drive sustainability in East Africa. Our data and ratings are used by many corporates, leading consulting house, PwC, and many other stakeholders. We understand that Africa risks and transition to sustainability will be very different to one in Europe, USA, or Asia. And let me just give you a couple of examples why we believe so. One of the largest risks in ESG transition globally is carbon emission, as we all know. If we look at Africa, we are living on a continent that has the lowest emission per head in the world. It creates huge opportunity for Africa, its people, companies, and governments. At the same time, African countries are particularly vulnerable to climate change impact. And there are two key reasons for this. Firstly, scientific studies predict that the most severe temperature changes caused by climate change will be experienced in 3 regions across the globe, and one of them is Sub-Saharan Africa. Secondly, the cost of protecting societies from the impacts of climate change, such as transitioning industries to the less carbon-intensive models of working and adapting to the changes that are already unavoidable, are extremely high, and Africa doesn't have means to cover those costs. Climate change is a global challenge that possesses significant risks to African continent with its diverse ecosystems, vast natural resources, and high dependence on agriculture. The African continent has already experienced increased frequency and severity of extreme weather events, such as floods, storms, which have led to significant economic and social losses. Climate change is expected to make worse existing social economic inequalities in Africa, which even before were very bad, affecting the poorest and the most vulnerable populations the most. Unfortunately, African countries are less prepared to meet these challenges and financing costs, which puts them at exposure to the risks of climate change at much higher degree than many others. As you see, climate change creates huge risk as well as opportunity for Africa, and at Risk Insights, as risk specialists, we always look beyond risk and how one can leverage opportunity and remove barriers to benefit from such opportunity. Opportunity in carbon trading are enormous for Africa and Africa-based businesses. Data collected by us, as well as other companies, will play a critical role in realizing such opportunities. And it is just one small part of sustainability agenda. We scaled up to the rest of Africa so that data can be consistent, reliable, transparent, understandable, and the most important bottom line, can be used to drive so required change. We need to go further for SMEs. Risk Insights recognize and the unparalleled risk for SMEs as we also part of the supply chain. If SMEs do not provide services that are traceable, sustainable, and are not ESG ready going forward, it will have negative impact on their license to operate. This will have, in turn, impact on the corporations, where SMEs offer products and services irrespectively if you are in B2B or B2C business. The ACUB model built by Risk Insights to assist the supply chain and counterparty risk management for sustainable finance by our founder to help the SMEs to be future ready. Future-proofing SMEs as sustainable entities is important, and the awareness for Africa is crucial. Large corporations are struggling with adapting ESG in Africa. So you can only imagine what this means for smaller businesses that don't have the access, knowledge, resources to prepare in this challenging and ever-changing environment. And I would like to stop here, because there are quite a number of the other keynotes today that will shed light more on this. We are data-driven, and our sustainability models have been created to help drive this new era of change. Once again, I would like to thank you, World Economic Forum New Champions community, for having Risk Insights share our sustainability journey, playing its part to assist future-proofing SMEs for Africa and this new era of climate governance. Anushka, over to you.
Anushka, you're on mute.
Pardon me. Thank you. So I think thank you, Andre, for that note. And I think what's very important is that data is the currency of the future. So ESG data will navigate ESG advisory to improve stewardships of businesses, their business transformation, protect board members from the perils of greenwashing, as well as protect reputation, brand management, and assist financial materiality for all stakeholder value creation. So thank you very much for that. And as you can see, Risk Insights is a futuristic company that is looking at ensuring that it can future-proof SMEs going forward in terms of this new era of climate governance. Our next keynote speaker is Dr. Frederick Demeritz, and we are so honored to have Frederick here with us today. He's an adjunct professor at Columbia University. He's also the executive director at UBS Investment Bank, where he is responsible for coverage of financial institutions, fintech, and ESG for Latin America. And Frederick has over 20 years of experience in investment banking in London, New York, Mexico, Sao Paulo. And he also has authored an amazing book called Finance with a Purpose, which was published in 2022. So he will lead this keynote address on sustainability, and I'm going to pass it over to Frederick. Over to you, Frederick.
Thank you very much, Anushka, and good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening. It's a privilege to be with you. Thank you, Andre, also for having me, and congratulations to Risk Insights and to the WEF community for this great event and for hosting a seminar on such an important topic. I wanted to share with you a few ideas around three topics, basically. The first one is the big challenges that are faced by boards and C-level and companies as a whole, which is something I've been looking at quite in details. And when I think of it, when I look at this, digitization and sustainability are the two biggest challenges of our time. So everything we hear about the digital economy, but also sustainability, whether we call it ESG or impact or sustainability, obviously the brands, the names, the concepts are not exactly similar, but they have a lot of overlap. And so obviously this is a huge challenge for a C-level, for an owner, for a board member, to embrace, to understand how they have to adjust their business facing those two big challenges. And what I feel talking to clients using my UBS hat for a second is that clearly ESG has gone out of the communications teams or the marketing teams, where ESG was very much about creating a narrative or telling us the story about the company, which is very important as well. I wouldn't diminish this, but it has gone up to the board over the past 2-3 years. And I see board members ill-equipped for this challenge very often. And I'm not talking necessarily about the blue chip, very large companies, big exporters, companies that are integrated into the global economy. I think those ones typically have huge ESG teams and legal teams to assist them. But I find that the challenge for SMEs or even larger companies, which are domestic only, find this quite challenging. So let me spend maybe a couple of minutes on the governance side, which obviously is a key aspect of the event today. We speak a lot about governance, but it's very rarely mentioned in details. We spend a lot of time on climate, on carbon, obviously very important. But governance is basically the set of rules, the set of manuals that direct how the company or how an organization is going to be run. And in particular, what interests me or what I find striking is that the governance is a set of tools, is a toolbox for you to address conflicts or difficulties, within the company, which will necessarily arise in the future. So, when I think of governance, obviously I can pull a few other themes that are interconnected, such as diversity within the company and within the leadership and the boards. And here, obviously, we always talk about, gender diversity or racial diversity, having communities that are underrepresented, such as people with disabilities, the LGBTQ plus community. But what I find is the most interesting concept is cognitive diversity. In other words, having around the table in the board people who have different backgrounds, different experiences, because they're going to be able to better address the difficulties, the struggles that the company will face. Struggles and opportunities, obviously, and there's always the two sides. That means that board members have to be trained. They have to embrace, that challenge of the sustainability. And when I see what C-level have to face, I find it mind blowing, to be honest. One day they might have to talk about supply chains. Think about their thousands of suppliers, scattered throughout Latin America, which is a region where I'm based. The next day, they might have to think about communities around their factories, and that might include indigenous communities, very complex topic. They might have to think about deforestation. They have to think about so many different topics, and obviously you cannot be a specialist of everything. But a good advice is that the board should have at least one person who understands, who follows very closely what's happening in the ESG world. So over the past few years, we've been advising a lot of clients on ESG, which means raising the bar together with them and helping them assess the markets, in particular for ESG bonds, such as green bonds. So UBS is the number one issuer of green bonds and ESG bonds in Brazil. But not just for that, for IPOs or M&A, you very often have ESG angles. So that's basically what we do with companies. And one question I get very often from board members is, we want to do it. We know we have to do it for a lot of different reasons. And Andre mentioned stakeholder capitalism. So they're being pressured, from different angles, obviously. And the question is, how do we start it? How do we start the journey? And what we always mention to them is, first you need to get the governance right, the governance of the company as a whole, but the governance of ESG. So somebody needs to be in charge and accountable, needs to be a senior person reporting the CEO or reporting to the board. So that's your first step. The second step is the materiality. What is it as a company that you want to impact? And the spoiler here is that you should not have 20 material aspects. Nobody can target, or deal with 20 important objectives. So maybe having half a dozen, with very precise objectives is probably the way to go. And the third one, and that's where I find that the solution that you're bringing to the table at Risk Insight can be really interesting. Third one is metrics and targets. So once you have the governance, and then you have the materiality and the strategy, then you need to have numbers, because you're not going to be able to make progress if you don't have data to think about this and very clear targets. So that would be my first comment about the governance. And let me, I mentioned I'm based in Brazil. Anushka, mentioned this as well. So one thing I started to think about over the past few weeks, since you invited me, is what are the analogies or what are some lessons learned, maybe that we can use from Brazil and maybe apply to Africa. Africa, with all its diversity, its wealth, faces similar to Latin America, a lot of challenges, and they include, high rates of inequality. There is volatility, public policies with subpar performance. So those are just some of the challenges, but obviously also a lot of opportunities. Young and growing population, a lot of talent, innovative hubs, and some very good, some very large and successful companies. And what I found really interesting in Brazil, LATAM, and other countries such as Kenya, for example, you mentioned the Nairobi Stock Exchange. And Kenya is a case study for fintechs. Is the ability for companies to leapfrog and reach the state of the art. So, giving an example that's closer to my heart and to my research field, you don't need to build brick and mortar bank branches if you want to give financial inclusion. We all know this, that's a case study. And here I'm thinking about Kenya, obviously, such an interesting case, globally. Brazil also very interesting for fintech. And I find that the success that we've had for fintechs and financial inclusion over the past 2 years, over the past 20 years, can definitely be replicated for the green agenda. So let's think about a Green New Deal and leapfrog, to best practices. We obviously don't have to repeat the mistakes of, other, and we have technology, which is an amazing tool. So that would be, a second comment. And the final one, maybe just to conclude, is, and I know this is part of the title of the seminar today, we're talking about climate, we're talking about carbon, but we are based in developing economies, in emerging markets, and carbon or ESG sustainability is a lot more than carbon. So climate is not enough. So that would be, my third message here. We know a lot about the social challenges that are faced, by African countries, but also by Latin American countries, and we're not going to solve the carbon dilemma or agenda if we don't address the social issues at the same time. And it's a huge challenge. And I always like to remind companies or boards that it's not antagonistic. You don't have to hurt nature in order to solve social challenges. We have to work with all of this in the balance. So maybe my call to action or my thought for you, you as young leaders of the WEF and at Risk Insights is, what can we learn from African examples, from African countries when it comes to the topic of including social issues together with climate? And also, I'll throw it here just to make it even more complex for you to think about biodiversity. So again, ESG is a lot more than carbon, and there's a lot of thinking, a lot of finance being directed toward biodiversity, and it's a huge challenge, obviously, for banks, for intermediaries, to think about how to have this in a very effective way. So maybe just to conclude, and before I pass on back to you, Anushka, I would say, what I've been focusing on at work, at UBS, but also in my academic research over the past few years, is that interconnection, that intersection between financial services and sustainability or purpose. And a lot of banks are going in that direction, a lot of intermediaries. There's a huge need for data, not just because everybody is very concerned about greenwashing, which makes sense. We should be concerned about this, but also, and more importantly, because we want to have the most impact for every dollar spent. And that's where data is so important. And so here, I would say Africa and the global South, they have an amazing opportunity to shape how we think about climate governance, but to include those other topics that I mentioned a bit earlier. So those were my remarks, and I pass on back to you, Anushka. Thank you.
Once again, I did not put my mic my mic on, so sorry about that. Thank you very much, Frederick, for those wonderful words. And I think what's interesting in terms of what Frederick has brought in is, governance is so key in terms of ESG. How the boards as well as management teams are going to buy in and own the aspects of ESG, sustainability, climate change, and the impact that it will have onto the bottom lines. Because if it doesn't make an impact on the bottom line, of course, that starts becoming the issue in terms of whether the resource needs to be deployed in this space. But I think from all the research that we've conducted and I've conducted at Risk Insights, we can definitely see a correlation between good ESG disclosure, good climate and identification of climate risk data, and what impact that has on financial materiality. And just going one step further in terms of the S1 and S2 regulations that have been published recently by the ISSB, also brings into the fore in terms of who owns that governance in terms of ESG and disclosure. It's actually the board of directors, and it becomes very complex if you don't have the right skills representing ESG at the board level. So thank you very much for that, Frederick. And I also think, the leapfrogging that Africa can do, could definitely make a difference in terms of this risk and changing it into an opportunity. I think supply chain, and I think Andre mentioned it briefly when he spoke earlier on, and I think Frederick has also brought it up in terms of the carbon emissions and scope 3 emissions, in terms of what does this mean for logistic management. And this has gained so much of attention over this last couple of years. And scope 3 emissions impact and contribute to about 70 to 80% of total carbon emissions. And logistic management businesses are really impacted by this. So today, we've also got Isha Mansingh, a powerhouse from DP World. She's an executive head of corporate affairs and sustainability of Sub-Saharan Africa. And she was recognized by the World Economic Forum as a young global leader in 2022. She's also a member of the Harvard Kennedy School Women's Leadership Board. She serves on several boards, including the National Business Initiative in South Africa, Unjani Clinics for Imperial, as well as the Motors Community Trust. And she's also a member of the local a board member of the local chapter in South Africa for New Champions. And she's been recognized both globally as well as in South Africa for her work in women empowerment. She is really such an inspirational woman, and I would really like to share her presence today at the New Champion community. And I think some of our members have not had the privilege of working with Isha, but I'd like to have her share her knowledge today with you. So over to you, Isha, to tell us a little bit about the greening of supply chains and what impact this has had for DP World, and if you can kindly give us some of your views on that. Over to you, Isha.
Anushka, thank you so much for such a kind and warm welcome, and thank you for the opportunity, and thank you to Julie and the WEF New Champions for the opportunity as well. You mentioned corporate, so I'm going to do this in true corporate style with the presentation. So I'm just going to start at the beginning. It's been such a phenomenal journey. I think, as Anushka mentioned, I now represent DP World, which is one of the top 10 largest logistics and ports businesses. And I've got the privilege to focus on the sustainability and climate agenda for Africa, particularly Sub-Saharan Africa, which is one of DP World's most prominent and largest regions, serving over 27,000 people. And the reason I'm, talking to you about the scale of being in 48 Sub-Saharan Africa markets is to actually demonstrate that if we do this right, the impact that we can have, not only as a company, but the impact that we can have on the climate agenda through our partnerships and through our communities and through each other. And this is why I'm so excited about, today's topic, Anushka. So thank you. And I think, many of our speakers have spoken about sustainability or ESG. And what does this all mean for us as individuals, for us as corporates, for us as SMMEs, and for us as humans of the world? And so ESG for us, in business, particularly in supply chain, has definitely gone mainstream. I think we spoke a bit about the stakeholder capitalism earlier, and it did start a few years ago with that infamous or famous, whichever one you want to call it, letter from Larry Fink from BlackRock, the CEO, that issued a letter to all his investors or companies that invested in him through BlackRock, and putting pressure on all of these companies to start thinking about sustainability and to start thinking about ESG. And there was a lot of pressure coming through from the investor community at that time, and then you started to see the introduction of a lot of new reporting and governance standards coming to the fore. But it was very much a tick box approach at that stage, and I'm talking only just a few years ago. But where we look at sustainability today and the call for climate action, I think we need to realize that it's not only our investors that are putting this pressure on us anymore. I mean, it's key. It is critical if you want to retain your social license to operate. I mean, localization is becoming so critical in everything that we do. And if you don't do it right, you don't tick the right boxes, it has a significant reputational risk to your business. So in addition to the social license to operate, the regulatory and reputational risk on the legal side, sustainability should be the top consideration in that. Most employees in today's day and age want to work for a company that they can be proud of, a country that's a good corporate citizen. So sustainability is also quickly making its way to the employee value propositions of a business. And we've seen this firsthand with 27,000 employees. And it's becoming a critical part of not only how do we retain individuals, but how do we attract new younger talent that want to work for a responsible, sustainable business. I think Anushka summed it up very nicely that, we're now living in the world where it's no longer just about financial profits. It is about the consideration we give to our people as our greatest assets, but also to the planet. And indirectly, the investment that we make now in sustainability and in climate action, we may not see the financial benefit tomorrow, but we'll certainly see the financial benefits in the years to come, in generations to come. And I think it's a very tough decision for us to make because many management teams and boards are not around for long periods of time to see the benefits of their investment. But we'll get to the governance part of it shortly. But I think from a sustainability perspective, it is really about, taking the shorter term pain for the longer term gain when you actually put forward this investment that you need to make in terms of the climate action activities that you take. And then we like to call it localize, because, sustainability, as I said earlier, is not just about ticking a box. It's not just about doing something because an investor tells you this is the thing to do, or because you have to meet compliance from a BEE scorecard or ESG scorecard perspective. But it's really about bringing together global best practice, and there's a lot of that we can share with each other, together with what our local stakeholders require. What do our local communities require? What are our localization regulatory requirements, and how do we bring this all together? And I think the one thing I do want to stress is for, certainly for business of our size, but also in the SME space, think about what does sustainability and climate action mean to you, because you can't be everything to everyone. And, you really have to prioritize how are you going to create sustainable value, but how are you also going to make that mark in our climate action journey? This very high level, for those of you that don't know, DP World is our strategy. And some of our legacy focal pillars, as you can see, very much aligned to the SDGs: women, education, water. And, these are where we prioritize our efforts. And this is where we're really starting to see the impact in the needs analysis for the communities in which we operate, particularly in Africa. Now, coming to green governance, and, when I heard Frederic speak, it was almost like a carbon copy. And I'm just going to stand up because the lights have not picked me up. That's one of our sustainability actions at the office. So just in terms of green governance, I think we spoke a lot about how it starts from the top. And if we don't get the endorsement, if we don't get the responsibility, the accountability starting from the very top of the organization, setting the tone for the importance of ESG or sustainability in our businesses, we will not be a successful business. And, further to that, to my earlier point about, we can very easily go into the box of just making it a tick box approach. But it's a lot more than that. And if it starts at board level, we can then ensure that sustainability becomes a part of our business strategy. And that's ultimately the end game for all of us, to think about sustainability in every single thing that we do every single day, whether we're at the office or whether we're out of the office or whether we're at home. How do we set from board level down the accountability and the culture of each of us taking responsibility for our actions and doing the right thing for our climate in everything? And I think we also need to stress that, especially in the SME space, you don't need big budgets, to invest in significant climate action or sustainability projects. Every initiative that you embark on, no matter how big or how small, will have an impact. So don't forget that. I think I also spoke about this integrating it into daily business practice. We had a lot of debate of what do we want to include for sustainability in our strategy? Do we pick out climate? Do we pick out governance? Do we pick out social? Exactly as Frederic was explaining. We said, well, it's really simple. Let's integrate it into everything we do. Whether we're considering our employees, whether we're considering the environment, whether we're considering our communities. And, I just want to say that it's no longer just the right thing to do. It's become a necessity if you want to be relevant as a business. Even our clients, Anushka spoke about Scope 3 emissions, our clients expect us to have the right practices in place. They measure us by it. Even if we have a 20-year relationship with a client, if I cannot commit to certain KPIs in the sustainability and ESG space to help them and their supply chains achieve their targets, I will not renew that contract. That's how significant ESG and our commitments and objectives in the space have become to our relevance as a business. And then I think this is just to show you how we bring it all together. We don't need a 500-page sustainability strategy document. It takes us a long time of collaboration at all levels of the business to get here. But ideally for us, we've got a strategy on the page that focuses on the key aspects of environmental, social, and governance, a few issues that we want to make an impact in, the metrics and targets, very important to the points of our earlier speakers. Andre spoke a lot about it and the great work Risk Insights is doing to support companies on this. You have to be able to tangibly measure what you do, because if you can't measure it, you can't report on it and you can't improve on it. So you have to choose tangible objectives with key metrics and targets. What's your end game? Where are you working towards? A longer term target, and then the roadmap of how you're going to get there. And then very simple initiatives that everyone in the business agrees on. Because if everyone agrees on it, then we are very aligned that we can all come together to achieve it. So this is what we want to focus on. Again, not a 500-page document, but just a strategy on a page that we can report back on, that the board can take accountability on, that our clients can hold us to account on. Then very quickly, I am conscious of time. This is just high level what we're doing in the logistics space to support a lot of our customers. As we said, we are a key part of their supply chain. So everything we do helps our customers and clients achieve their objectives. It's really about the decarbonization journey, where we're playing a key part, particularly in Africa, given our footprint and our big trucking fleet. Our control tower, which gives our clients visibility, reliability, and flexibility of their full end-to-end supply chain. Again, bringing in the technology angle that Frederic spoke about earlier. And then it's also about our supply chain. It's not only about our client supply chain. It's about our subcontractors that we bring in to support us, and just helping them understand the necessity of how they can reduce their emissions, how they can be part of our ecosystem. To make sure that they get the right fleet into the system that lowers emissions, etc. And I'm going to end with this slide, Anushka, because I think it's very important for all of us to realize that as individuals and as corporates, we can make an impact, but we should not forget about the power of partnerships. And if we can partner with our supply chains, with each other, the impact on our climates will be a lot stronger. And I think this is where we really need to be a collective. And, Africa has the advantage that we're building while we're fixing. So if we start leveraging the great work that all of us are doing in the climate action space, I think we can make an impact a lot quicker so that we can save our planet for our future generations. So I'm going to leave it there, Anushka. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Isha. And that was really so well presented. I think, coming back to your point of collective knowledge, collective sharing, collective partnerships, collective thinking, it always makes a difference, right? But I want to pick on a few things that Isha has brought, in this deliverance is the whole entire aspect of who owns this ESG. And I think earlier on, when Frederic was speaking about this, we spoke about governance and the board. But I think very often we actually forget about the actual asset owner, because Isha brought up Larry Fink, right? And there's so many stories about whether this is good or bad. But I think at the end of the day, the asset owner is not looking at this impact of ESG and sustainability and what it means for them. That also drives that bottom-up, top-down approach in terms of governance. And I think the other aspect that is very important for SMEs and companies to constantly bear in mind is how people and individuals are being employed or attriting from companies based on the ESG agenda, sustainability. So can you retain skills, because people want to work for brands and companies that are taking into account the future. Because you don't work for today, you work for the future, right? Your pension funds, your provident funds, your retirement funds are all about the future, unless you're going to short the market as an individual, right? And that's not what we're looking at when you are an employee. So the skills retention, and I think what is also very important is how do we work together with these different facets of businesses that are doing things differently in different parts of the world. UBS has a strategy in Brazil, and how they are driving the green bonds and green agenda. How DP World is doing this in the Middle East and now in Africa. And what does it mean for climate change and climate footprint? And Risk Insights has this model in Africa, built for Africans in terms of ESG. How do you scale some of that knowledge and individualism of Africa into the rest of the world, so that countries become conscious of some of the social issues as well as environmental issues of Africa, given that sub-Saharan Africa is one of the parts of the world that might be affected quite extensively by climate change. But I think all of this then boils down to one of the most important aspects, which is the carbon counting, right? And the carbon counting and the traceability is one of the most important pieces, because it gives you the essence of where you are as an institution in terms of how green are you, or how much further you need to transform, how much more do you have to improve on your stewardship. And for that, today we have the president of Optal Group, Mr. Louis Roy, who is the founder of Optal, and it is a traceability leader and a certified B Corp. And they have been developing traceability technologies to create a better and a more sustainable world and a much more intelligent supply chain. So I'm sure this will be of interest to all of us to create. And I mean, the products and services that Louis' institution has put in place has created a really true end-to-end sustainability and traceability platform in the world. So I have the privilege of introducing Louis Roy, the president and founder of Optal, and also a board member of advisory board member of the New Champions Group community. Over to you, Louis.
Very much, Anushka. It's a pleasure to be here. First, I would like to share my story. I would not be what I am without Africa. So I had the chance to grow in a family that was quite involved in Africa, and I lived in Africa for several years when I was young. And it's what gave me this drive to build a better world. Without this experience in Africa, I wouldn't have founded Optal. I wouldn't have pushed the limit to try to build a better world for all the children, but especially for those in Africa. So along the way, along the years, we had a lot of experience in Africa. We're one of the first company securing a gold supply chain for non-conflict gold traceability in Africa. We also support Ghana in exporting their vegetable and fruit when they had a disease in part of Ghana. We help and monitor the agriculture practice on coffee, cacao supply chain in Nigeria, Ivory Coast, and of course help in DRC to have transparency on the TTG supply chain. So it is in our DNA, and what we do is, again, try to ensure a future for the children of the world, but especially for those in Africa. Because, as you all probably expect, climate change is a threat for everyone, but especially for the poorest country. We cannot continue like this. So I'm an engineer in the team. At 15 years old, I say, what can I do for the world and for Africa? Well, my talent is engineer. I'm a tech guy. I'm a programmer. I'm a master in physics. I'm an electronic designer. And I decide to use technology to try to address some challenge, like medication traceability to ensure proper dispensing and everywhere around the world. So Optal track over 50 billion of medication every year to ensure that they go to the right place, they are not counterfeit, and that they respect the integrity of the drug supply chain. In 2017, we decide to address the threat of climate change. And in our assumption, it is due to human carbon emission. So we looked at the technology and the ecosystem, and it became clear that if we don't do all the supply chain accountability, it will never happen. We already saw at the time some companies say we're net zero, but it was a joke. They were net zero because their carbon emission represent only about 1 or 2% of their product emission, and they say we're net zero. No, in reality, the big part of the emission are on scope 3, on upstream or downstream of the supply chain. So that's what we try to tackle. So the way we approach and the way now we help company from very small size, small, medium, and large corporation like the Coca-Cola of the world, we provide them solutions that are useful for everyone in the company. As it was mentioned, ESG and carbon, it's not only the problem of the ESG person, it's a problem for every citizen. It's the problem of everyone inside a company and a corporation and along the supply chain. So we developed a tool for the product designer, understanding where does their carbon emission come from in their life cycle, in the entire life cycle from the extraction of mineral or vegetable to the end of life of the product. How do you dispose? So we offer those solutions from small and medium company to be able really to capture the information and do design. Because there is no secret here. Product that cannot be decarbonized have no future. Financial, the top investors that are really looking at where to invest, they will not invest in product, in company that produce product that cannot be decarbonized. So it starts at the R&D of the product. After you go at the procurement people, now they have tons of regulation. They have to take care of the CSRD, the ESG, the forced labor regulation, etc. The procurement are in charge of ensuring that what they buy, what is the carbon footprint? Is it the real carbon footprint? And where was it sourced? How was it transported, etc. So we offer a tool to be able to provide traceability, visibility, supply chain, supplier onboarding from tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, up to the farmer. Like for example, for EUDR, the regulation in Europe against deforestation, it required to capture the geolocalization of the field where the coffee, the cacao, or the forest derivative product comes. And when they enter in Europe at the custom, they have to provide those geolocalization points. That's what we do. We offer a tool for the procurement to be able to capture this information and report that. Then we have the operation. Everyone needs to do whatever they can to reduce carbon footprint. The operation, what they master the process. They master the efficiency of the line. If they are inefficient, they will generate a lot of waste. Waste is carbon footprint that should not be emitted. So we offer to the operation all the visibility under a different process. What is the efficiency? What is the carbon footprint? What is the electricity usage? And then you go to the logistic provider. We work with partners here that can optimize a logistic provider, as you mentioned in DP work. So this is hard by itself, but there are key solutions here that can help logistic provider to reduce their carbon footprint and select the best path to how to get the product to the right place. But at the same time, you need to monitor the inventory, because if you end up with some of our customers, they end up with wasted inventory along the supply chain. And at the end of the year, one of our customers get up to 8% of their product that are returned expired. This is, again, an enormous waste of energy and carbon due to supply chain efficiency. We help bringing this transparency along downstream supply chain to manage that. And then, of course, with this information, now with risk insight, you can build the risk litigation. Okay. And the company, again, I told you, that cannot decarbonize, you have a major risk. How it will impact Africa? Africa, as it was mentioned, does not have a big carbon footprint, but company in Europe, and I hope soon in Canada, and I know in US, California has started, company will have to dig down into their supply chain. Let's say a coffee, in a couple of years, when people will take coffee, it will come with a carbon footprint attached. So the coffee that will be entering in Europe, in US, and in more and more countries will have to be sourced from sustainable agriculture. So a major movement is coming for Africa, and if Africa is left apart, if Africa doesn't open its eyes to that, if country doesn't work on helping the agriculture, the farmer, the SME, there will be a major problem, a major risk for Africa. So technology is there. And on top of that, we come from the AI world. We were one of the first company in the 90s to develop AI-based inspection system. So now we use AI on every aspect of the supply chain, of the bill of material, of the process. We provide tips from AI. What can you do to reduce? And this can be brought into an action plan. This can be brought into the SBTY alignment to say, okay, here's what I'm going to do. Because the knowledge how to decarbonize, how to calculate, need to be automatized. It needs to be democratized because we don't have much time. This year, probably we already be 1.5 this year on average. In 2023, it seems that we're going to be 1.5 degree. We're already at 1.5 degree. It's going much faster than we expect. So it's time to accelerate and make the hard choice. When some of our customers use our platform, they see that there is no way to decarbonize that. So what they need to do, they need to reinvent their business model. They need to extend the life of the product. They need to put in place either the service to be able to refurbish, to repair, or to take back their product. Because when you take back the product, then if you can use the same material, then you're reducing your carbon footprint. There will be a lot of redesign of entire business operation in the coming year, and that's inevitable. And we need to do that for the sake of the children. So I'm passionate about it. Technology will help the digitalization, will help to connect all the different stakeholders. Again, the EUDR, it's a big challenge, but EUDR on the deforestation will help connect to millions of smallholders in Brazil, in Africa, in Indonesia, to be able to stop deforestation and improve agriculture practice. So technology is there to support this decarbonization and take care of our planet if we want it to be livable.
Thank you very much, Louis. I think that is really a lot that we have to do as Africa. I think the points that you make about decarbonization and products that still need to go through when you're going through R&D for new products, yes, you can look at the decarbonization at the point of the build of the product. I think where Africa is really struggling is where you have products that are already large carbon emitters, and how do you go into that just transition phase of ensuring that you're phasing that out and you're building and bringing in skills and technology to be able to decarbonize from the start of the product, or have a product that actually has a very low carbon footprint. So that takes up a lot of skills and development and a lot of different ways of looking at products and services going forward. I think the product life cycle and what happens to the product during that the transitions is absolutely critical in terms of the measuring of the carbon footprint. So an amazing piece in terms of technology that the Optal Group have created, and thank you for sharing that. But I think more importantly is this aspect of carbonization and decarbonization is all about where the money for businesses will come from going forward, because the lower your carbon footprint, the more carbon credits you would have. It will impact on the bottom line going forward in terms of the carbon exchanges that are being that are starting to crop up across the globe in terms of carbon debits and carbon credits. So Africa is still quite far from that, but working towards that progression. So thank you very much, Louis, for sharing that with us. And I think we all can see the level of complexity that is also involved. And I love the fact that you are a techie, because that helps us. We need more techies in the world. So I trust that everyone has enjoyed the session and the keynotes that have come through. And if you want to delve more into any of the subject matters, and if you have any further questions, please pop a question across through to info@riskinsights.co.za. And the team that I have been here today will basically answer your questions and send them through. We just don't have too much of time to get through this entire session because it is quite complex. But I thoroughly enjoyed being your host today. But we are not at the end of the session. We have a very, very phenomenal speaker and our final and most important guest. It's none other than Julia Davos, who is dear to me and a very, very good mentor, and also the head of the New Champion community of the World Economic Forum. And she's going to join us on the closing address and tell you a little bit more about New Champions, but also bid you goodbye with some of her closing notes. From my side, thank you very much, and it was an absolute pleasure hosting you today. Over to you, Julia.
Thank you, Anushka. Thank you for these good words. And honestly, here I feel like being only the messenger. To be honest, I mean, our co-panelists shared so many amazing stories, and this is exactly what we want to do at the World Economic Forum, is sharing stories to inspire others. So thank you very much, Anushka, and the team, and your fellow New Champions for putting that together today for the benefit of other SME. And I think that while we are talking about SMEs, I wanted to start maybe first with why we are talking specifically about SME. I mean, in Africa, SME is a group of companies that is of utmost importance globally. I mean, their collective weight is enormous. We have in the world 9 out of 10 companies being an SME. When we say SME, we can say small, very small, or even mid-sized companies. But they represent 70% of the employment, and in some countries, in some part of the world, 70% of the GDP, which is absolutely enormous. And that is why the World Economic Forum is committed to also connect and support these companies, because this is not something that the World Economic Forum is very well known about. We always think about the World Economic Forum working with the multinationals, but this is not the only thing that we do. And this is the real proof here today. And I'm very proud of this group and heading this group. So while the impact of the SMEs is really high, we have to recognize also that the impact and their influence in terms of ESG on the 3 pillars of ESG is also very high. Especially, I mean, of course, environment, we discuss carbon footprint, scope 3 emissions, and no doubt about it, they are very, a very big piece of it. Socially, they have a huge part to play in their social environment, educational support or social welfare, so really important here as well. And the governance, because having ethical governance practice obviously increase the reputation and attract responsible investors as well. We therefore see the impact and the importance of why the SME should integrate ESG practices into their day-to-day business. However, when we say that, SMEs must imagine that this is only about cost, only about things that and rules and regulations and things that will come our way that will be very difficult for us to put into place. But there are also a lot of benefits, and the benefits should surpass the cost actually, because all of you in some of your different examples, you mentioned having also a better reputation, which brings better people to work for you, better investments and investors also coming your way. You have to think about the regulations that are actually coming into place, and especially if you think about Europe, SMEs must think, this is very far away for me. But no, anyone who is going to deal with Europe will have to actually manage somehow their ESG responsibility. So there will be benefits in really working towards better ESG measures to the benefits of your own business, actually. And this is also why, for us at the World Economic Forum, we want to ensure that we actually select these amazing SMEs to share their inspiring stories and I mean, Louis, Anushka, Isha, you are, and Andre, you are really our great example of that. Having inspiring leaders who are really telling their story, who are sharing their story to really inspire others and to tell them that this is possible. Anything is possible if you really want it. And you can really clearly state the example, then this is something that we really want to share with the rest of the world. We have today in our new champion community more than 100 companies from different industries from all around the world, and they are all mission-driven companies. And this is very key. They are embedding into their business model all these ESG principles and the fact that they want to be the game changer for the future. And we select them for that. So we select them to be our the voices of this SMEs, and to really we really want to support them by providing them the knowledge needed. As Frederick mentioned, all the C-level people, they cannot just know all. We don't pretend to give them all the knowledge either, but at least with the collective knowledge that we have at the forum, we really try to provide this to our members. And I mean, of course, anything else like social challenges or governance cannot be just solved like this. You need a very strong network to do that. And the Isha, you mentioned the power of partnerships. This is exactly what we are doing here, and what you have put together today is that we can all, being partners, create shared value. This is very key to us, Anushka, as you know, creating this shared value to ensure that we are bringing something to the world. So, if I have to leave you with maybe 3 key elements for any SME or any company to consider while thinking about ESG and while thinking about your future for a better sustainable business and even better sustainable world, it will be to ensure that you have the right platform with the right knowledge. That's very important to ensure that you get the right information to make better informed decisions. That's number 1. Number 2, to get together to have a network of impact. And I know Louis is very keen about this one. So if you have more questions about network, you can definitely connect to him. And the third point is really to share your impact. This is very important. Many companies think that, this is ESG regulation or things, it's for the multinationals, but that's not true. Everyone has a part to play, and SME more than anyone else. So that will be my last words. Thank you so much for joining us today. And thank you, Anushka, Andre, Louis, Isha, Frederick, for being great panelists. And I hope to see many of you, discussing with us how we can make this world better. Thank you.